how did you manage to break into investment banking in a non-target?
I mean, networking is really the only way you can do it. I struggled with that a lot, actually. And I wasn't the most technically advanced. I was very personable. I actually applied to the current firm I work at for an internship and got rejected. So in a week, I work 60 hours. If the week is heavier, with 80 hours a week. I have some family background, and I saw the mistakes they made with not being as prepared during school, and I said, that is not gonna be me. There's a couple times I've wanted to cry at work.
The sleep thing you said is so interesting. I've never heard anybody say that before. Our guest today, his name is Fit Finance Bro. You can find him on Instagram with that username. I actually came across his account, I think when I was studying abroad, and I was in Dublin, and I was looking, because this was at the beginning of my content. I'm trying to build a personal brand, trying to find a little niche, and I see his account, and I'm like, fuck, this is such a good combination of different things. Like, you get the memes, you get bodybuilding, you get finance, and it's like this little niche inside itself. And it was super impressive. And I love his content. There's like a humorous side to it. And you got to respect it, because IB plus getting this content plus bodybuilding, it's a grind. So we're going to dive into all of this stuff. Fit Finance Bro, thank you so much for coming on. And I want to start off and just address the elephant in the room. Why does nobody know your name, where you work, or just who you are as a person?
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. It's great to be with you today. Biggest reason is I actually created this account after accepting my full-time investment banking offer to a boutique investment bank on the West Coast. And so usually finance firms are pretty secretive, not secretive, but they like to keep a lot of their employees' information and kind of what they're doing low key. And so, after accepting my full-time offer, I started posting content like, hey, here's what I did to break into investment banking, liked posting some memes, a little bit of day in the life stuff. And I blew up pretty quick. I think I got to like 20K followers in just a few months. And so I felt like I should disclose this to my firm just in case. I didn't want there to be any problems that would affect my offer. And so I disclosed it to our HR director, and she told me that I can keep the account as long as I'm responsible with it. And so she suggested I continue to do like I was doing, keep everything anonymous. I can show my face, of course, but don't want to involve the firm in anything. Don't want to involve my coworkers with the stuff we're working on. It's why I also don't record inside the office, things like that. So while I do base a lot of my content around my job, I can't talk too much about my job, if that makes sense.
Is there part of you that's like, man, I wish I could reveal a little bit more, or do you kind of like being anonymous?
I think it goes back and forth. I feel like I'd be able to relate to people a little better if I shared exactly who I was, where I was, the city I'm living in, all that, even where I went to school. A lot of people want to know what firm I'm at. They want to know how non-target my school really was. And it was really non-target. We recruit probably one person into IB every 5 to 6 years. Yeah, so like it's a no-name state school that like nobody thinks of. And I feel like I'd be able to establish that relationship with my followers a little better, but it also just prevents uh, it prevents me dealing with a lot of the hassle that may come with that.
Yeah.
Making sure I don't overshare about my firm, or it prevents definitely kids finding me on like LinkedIn and stuff like that and spamming my email saying like, hey, I want a coffee chat and things like that, because that's how investment banking is. I mean, as it is, I already get a lot of emails from college kids asking like, hey, let's have a coffee chat, and they don't even know I have an account, which is great. I want to keep the two lives kind of separate. Like, one's a hobby and one's my professional life.
Interesting. So I go to WashU. WashU's pretty heavily recruited for IB. Like, you get in the business school, kids are trying to go one of two routes. They're trying to go into consulting, maybe work a big three, or they're trying to work at all these different type of investment banks. And so it's a grind. I understand how difficult it is to get into these positions, and that's coming from a target school. How did you manage to break into investment banking in a non-target?
I mean, networking is really the only way you can do it. So we don't have any investment banks that recruited at my university. I had a couple alumni that I connected with that were very helpful in the process. Um, they actually referred me to the current firm I work at, but interesting story there. I actually applied to the current firm I work at for an internship and got rejected.
Okay.
Um, which is interesting. So basically what happened is I networked a ton. I actually interviewed at some larger banks as well, places like Stifel, Wells Fargo,
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Never got I got a first round at Morgan Stanley again through a connection, but I didn't really have a chance to be honest. Um, but it really just came down to networking and being personable. I think networking is thrown around so loosely, like, oh, just talk to people. It's like you have to have a certain character, you have to have a certain way of speaking, and actually be like interested in them. Like the conversation you and I are having today, I want to know about you, you want to know about me, right? We're sharing similarities, things like that. Whereas a lot of students just say like, "Hey, what do you do every day? How can I get into banking? Do you have a job for me?" Basically, and and like I take kids calls even these days as an analyst, and you can tell the kids whether they're technically apt or not
Yeah.
when it comes to like skills and technical questions. You can tell if they're actually interested in your firm, in your city, in you as the interviewer or just the coffee chat analyst, right? And it makes a huge difference in just our preference. And so I think I was able to capture that while I was recruiting.
Right.
And even though I wasn't from a target, and I even wasn't the most technically advanced candidate out there, I really wasn't. I struggled with that a lot, actually. I was very personable. Some will call that a personality hire. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. I think I caught up eventually.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it makes a way bigger difference than people let on.
Okay, so I get DMs all the time, just kids asking me like, "Yo, I need help with this internship. Like, what should I do? How do I get this internship?" My number one answer always is what you said. It's really networking. Like it's a game of connections and who you know. But then the next follow-up question is like, okay, like I get on the phone, I'm trying to network. How do I do it? What types of questions that I'm asking? And it sounds like from your perspective, the cheat code is to sound genuine. And so is that get on a call and just chop it up? Like be less professional, or do you still want to maintain an element of being professional and sticking only to the business side of things?
No, I think you don't want to be less professional, but the topics don't have to be about being professional, or the topics don't have to be only focused on investment banking. I mean, if you can talk to someone professionally about their life, I feel like that's a huge step up. Um, Oftentimes it's okay, I want to hear about the person I'm talking to as a student. I wanted to hear about how they got to where they were, but then kind of also beyond that, like why they got to where they are. Like what did they struggle with? What were they happy about? What did they do well? What did they not do well? Not so I can then like learn from it. Of course I want to learn from it, but I'm also just curious. Like I just want to know. I want to get to know them. I want to I know it sounds cheesy, but I want to make a friend, right?
Yeah.
Um, and one of my first connections that I established was between my freshman and sophomore year when I was really figuring out if I wanted to go into banking or not. Um, and I was working at a restaurant, and I met this gentleman who his cousin was the head of equity capital markets at a very large bank.
Okay.
Um, and I served him and his wife. It was a resort hotel restaurant type thing. I served him and his wife for 5 days straight breakfast over the summer, and we just chatted. Obviously, I was in the service industry. I had to be professional, right? But I wasn't. I was able to talk about his life at the breakfast table, right? In a genuine way. I was able to relate to him, even though he's 35 years older than me. Um, and at the end, we threw around investment banking a little bit, but not really. I said, yeah, this is kind of what I'm interested in. And if you have any advice, I'd always love to hear it. And at the end, he said, you know what? You've done a great job. I really love, I'd like to get to know you better. He gave me his number. We talked for like 2 hours after that on the phone, talking about life, talking about investment banking, talking about how to get in and all these different things. And he gave me some great referrals. Um, Now I think that's a unique scenario, but the message is the same. Whether it's, you only get 30 minutes or you get 5 days serving him and his wife breakfast. Um, the way you portray yourself and communicate yourself and the interest you show in them, not just what you can get out of them, is huge.
Agreed. So, but what about from a networking standpoint? Like people will ask, okay, so I want to network. Where do I start? And so someone that goes to, I mean, they could be a target school or a non-target school. Who should they? How do they get in front of these people? Like, what steps are there?
I think the first step is talk to your professors. I think this is largely underrated, but if you think about it, especially the tenured professors who have seen kids go everywhere and they know all of them. And chances are, like if my professor reaches out to me and he's like, "Hey, there's this kid that came to me asking for someone like you," that's a huge compliment to me. I don't care how old you are, right? Even if I'm a VP or director at that point, I feel like I'd still want to hear that. And so that's what I did. I went to a lot of my professors initially before directly reaching out to alumni to discuss my interests, discuss what they knew about the industry. And they said, "Oh, here's these 5 students, right?" Um, and they connected me personally with those 5 students.
Gotcha.
And then after that, I kept updating my professors with how things were going. And they said, "Oh, actually, here's another couple students that I may know." And then from there, also with the alumni that I was able to connect with, they were able to connect me with some other folks at their banks and private equity firms who weren't from my school. But because my alumni liked me enough, he was willing to connect me with other people. And those people liked me enough, and I was just able to build my network, starting from my professors. Super simple. But it's the character that counts.
Yeah. Okay. Do you? So when you're on these calls, because one of my good friends, he was recruiting for IB our sophomore year, and he would tell me about every single time at the end of the call, he's asking to some extent, "Can you pass me along to the next guy?" Is that you think that's like a consistent non-negotiable? Every single call you should be doing this, or do you think that's a little bit too pushy?
Yeah, I think it's a non-negotiable, but how you phrase it is very important. So typically, what I'd say, and it would depend on the call too, is I'd say something along the lines of, I thought your journey was interesting, and this, it really helped me understand kind of where I want to go, things like that. Is there someone else that you know that had a similar journey, or even a different journey that you think would be helpful that I speak to?
Gotcha.
Um, something along those lines, and it varied person to person. I didn't have like a fixed template, right, or question that I would ask. Um, but yeah, I think it's kind of a non-negotiable, especially because you don't have much to lose.
Right.
Worst case scenario, they say like, "Oh no, I don't really have anyone," or they say they do and they just don't really refer you.
Yeah, that's a good point. What about going in more to you? Like everybody hears investment banking and they're like, "Holy shit. I'm going to be working like a dog. It's going to be a grind. I'm going to get a very good bonus though. Like things are going to be good." Break down like what does a day in your life look like? What does a week in the life look like? On the weekends too. I'm very curious what that looks like.
Yeah, so day in the life, it really varies, especially at my bank. So I work at a boutique bank, not a bulge bracket.
Right.
We're not, I mean, I think there's 12 of us on the team. Um, and so we're very much, I think personally, we're a lot more efficient than a lot of banks. We don't have like a lot of stuff like false deadlines, unnecessary tasks if there's something else that should be completed instead. Um, so that cuts out a lot of the extra time if you really like break it down to a small, efficient team. So in a week, I work probably 60 hours. Um, if the week is heavier, which definitely gets heavier, I mean, let's say we have more than 2 or 3 pitches going on at the same time, and I'm the only analyst on a team. It's like, okay, I may be in charge of 2 pitch decks, and I got to make sure everything is shipshape. Or say we're in a live deal and I have to, work with the buyer and getting all the diligence set up. And I get a diligence request over the weekend. It's like, okay, well, now I have to do that. So it definitely gets up there to like the classic, like 80 hours a week for investment banking, right? But it's not as consistent. at a boutique firm like mine. So day in the life, really, like I said, depends on the project. I usually get to the office around 8:30.
Okay.
Um, and we're in the office minimum like 8 to 5 technically, or like 9 to 5. And then after that, you can leave at like, I usually leave at like 6:37. And then you go home and you can work from home the rest of the night. So you don't have to be in office if there's extra work to do. Some days I can come home at like 6:37 and there isn't anything left for me to do.
Nice.
It happens. Other times, most times, I think I come on and come home and log back on. Um, and that can vary. I work another, hour or two. Maybe it's into the night, sometimes. So,
I mean,
and then,
go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
Like I'm just trying to think. Like I know you're doing a bodybuilding show and it's coming up, right? So
Hmm.
that you have to train every single day. You have to train hard. But something I did this summer is I worked a corporate internship at Abbott. So I was in the office pretty much every day a week. It was just your typical 9 to 5. So it was not any investment banking hours. But I'm sitting in the office. I'm not moving at all. I get to the end of the day, I check my Whoop. I'm at like 1,300 calories burned. Like that's tough. I'm trying to drop my body fat and like get in shape, but you just like don't burn calories. And I gotta think that's a major issue if you're really trying to make it in bodybuilding with a physique. So like, how do you balance that and how do you move around?
Yeah, I think during the day, I honestly don't move around much, and that sucks. I wish I did, but I work out every morning at 5:30 a.m. Like I'm in the gym, so I get about 70 to 80 minutes in there,
Okay.
um, in the gym, and that includes like weights and cardio. And then I used to walk to work a lot. I every day I'd walk to work, which was about 20, a little over a mile, and then I'd walk home too. So that was kind of my movement. Now that my bodybuilding is much more structured with my coach, I don't walk to work anymore. I ride an electric scooter actually.
Okay.
Um, but that's because I've allocated all of my cardio to a specific time at a specific set heart rate. Um, and so really I'm fortunate enough that I already had quite a bit of muscle mass before coming into banking. Like over college, I played sports. I was on the lacrosse team, and stuff like that. So I had the base, but now that I'm in a job and I don't move as much, it's not as bad because I'm able to structure it exactly how I need it. So, that means I may not eat as much, which sucks, but
Well, that's what I'm saying because you obviously probably track your calories pretty stingently, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
I actually don't, only because my coach does it for me. So I don't do anything. I pay him to tell me exactly what to eat, basically when to eat, how to eat, all that stuff.
Okay. I have you ever what's the lowest body fat percentage you've gotten to?
Um, Probably 10-ish. I mean, I didn't get a lot of the like DEXA scans and stuff like that are have such high margin, like variable margins, within like 3 to 5%. So I don't trust them a ton, but yeah, probably around 10%. I did a
And
mock prep.
okay, what are you trying to get for this bodybuilding show?
Probably like 7-ish.
7. Okay, so,
Yeah.
so this is the thing. I'm trying to drop body fat really low right now. I took it on an in body a couple weeks ago, or maybe it was last week. It said I was like at 8.2%. I posted a reel about it, and people were just coming at me, telling me I'm not 8%. And so I'm like this. I'm like, I'm just going off of what this shit says. But whatever. Once you get to a certain point and you're consistently in a caloric deficit over and over and over again, it gets very tough to keep going and push past that. Like, does your coach has he given you strategies to maintain this? Do you rise back up into a surplus for a couple days, or what's your approach with that?
Honestly, I don't know if it's the healthiest thing, but just like caffeine. I'm not gonna lie. Um, it's like, oh, I'm losing focus. I'm feeling tired. I may feel like I haven't eaten. Well, let's drink some caffeine. Um, Now, I like to say that on my page, I like to think I'm healthy, right? And I advertise somewhat that I'm a healthy guy, all things considered for being in banking.
Yeah.
But I'm fit finance bro. I'm not like healthy finance bro. Um, so, which is kind of funny. I'm like, hey, I want to be huge and in the gym and also work in investment banking.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people tell me like, oh, you're eating just chicken and rice. Like, where's the veggies? It's like I'm eating some veggies, but probably not as much as I should, or I'm consuming, 500 milligrams of caffeine a day or maybe more sometimes. That's probably not great for me, but like it's what I want to do. So uh, it's a balance. It's a balance. It's what you want and how you want to get it, but it's not the best way to do it.
Yeah. What a okay, so I was looking at your page a little bit earlier today and I saw a post. I think this post like blew up. I think it did really well. But it was a post around what you sacrificed to get into investment banking from a non-target. And you listed, I missed family events. I didn't really have weekends. I quit my college sport. I never was able to go on summer vacations. Like, I got two questions. Why was that desire so strong? Like, what is it for IB with you? And then second of all, now being here, was it worth it?
Yeah. First of all, I was not a huge partier in college to begin with. I think that contributes. So like, I liked a social life, but I preferred working. And it just accommodated me better. Uh, and so the summer vacations, I had never taken vacations as a kid anyway. So it's like, I think I took one vacation, um, between my sophomore and junior year. And that was because I had a local internship, that kind of allowed me to take a week at the beginning and just start later. Um, and the reason I skipped a lot of that stuff is because of internships, right? Weekends, it's like, okay, I have to network on the weekends. I have to do all my homework on the weekends because during the week I was either in, college sports or um, I was doing homework or, whatever it might be. And so then beyond that, I had to quit my college sport to work internships, right? Because I had to work during school now. I didn't have a parent pay for my tuition. I didn't have parents pay for my apartment, or anything like that. So it's like once I got my kind of my first year, my parents helped me out like my first year and a half or so. But after that, it was like, okay, it's on me. Like, they can't help me out anymore. I had to quit my college sport, and work myself at internships, at jobs, and then also do everything like that on the side. So a part of it's money, part of it's like I wasn't super drawn to it to begin with. Looking at now, do I think it's worth it? Absolutely. Like invest. I mean, yeah, it's fantastic. I love my job. I love my firm. I love what I do. And my biggest motivator that whole time, you asked about drive, like what drove me to do that is I was so scared of regret.
Mm,
Um, Getting to a certain point, if you graduate university and all of a sudden you can't get a job, it's because of choices you made starting your freshman year, right?
mhm.
And it's like that's stuff you can't like go back and fix, and it takes so long to correct. So I figured my mentality was I better get near perfect grades right now so I don't regret that in the future. I better get as much experience in college right now so I don't realize at the end of graduation and say, oh shit, like I have no job or I have no, opportunity or whatever. Like,
Yeah,
because then you're going to have to grind to get it.
right.
But if you do the grind before, it's a lot easier than how much you'll have to grind after the fact. And I just didn't want to regret.
So something I talk about a lot that has completely changed my life. And it's a very cliche phrase. You're the sum of the five people you spend the most time around. So I came from a small town in Wisconsin. Everybody very similar to me. Like same religious, political views. We kind of just did this and that. I come to Wash U, boom. Everybody's from New York, LA, completely different, super driven, motivated, and they're on their internship grind freshman year. So I'm like, all right, I guess I got to pick this up. Nobody back home did that. And so I was never exposed to that back home. But as soon as I changed my environment, boom, I'm locked in. I'm trying to understand, like, you mentioned the money, you mentioned the IB, the regret. Like, how do you constantly prime yourself and get like make your way into IB coming from a state school when nobody around you is doing this? Like, where does IB even come from, and how do you sustain that motivation?
Yeah. Where does IB come from? That's a good point. So I had never even heard of IB. I'll give you a quick backstory. I had a family friend, my dad's best friend in high school. He ended up being really successful, went to Harvard and was the CEO of a couple Fortune 500 companies. I talked to him and said, "Hey, these are my interests. Uh, what do you think, being in the business world? I knew I was good at finance and I knew I was good at accounting. Where should I go?" And he said, "The way you speak to me, you sound like you want to go into investment banking." I said, "I don't even know what the hell that is." "Great, let's do it." Um, and obviously that's not the greatest like reason. On top of that, though, my dad also sold his small business when I was around that same age. And that's kind of what got me interested in like mergers and acquisitions and valuation because the business sold for a lot less than I thought it was worth. That's because I grew up around it, right? Um, and so those two things combined drove me to IB. And what was like the rest of that question? Sorry.
It's like, yeah, I guess it's like you're just in an environment where nobody else does this. So
Right.
the odds
Okay.
are so stacked against you to ever do this. So it's like, where does it come from? And how do you constantly like stay motivated towards this purpose when nobody else around you is ever doing this? Did you have like a small group of friends that were like supporting you with finance, maybe like a mastermind or none of that?
Um, I think I had two friends that that motivated me for sure. One ended up becoming, and this may give me away, but one ended up becoming a Rhodes Scholar, and he goes to Oxford now. From like our non-target school, right? Was insane. First time in like 30 years that we've had a Rhodes Scholar.
Wow.
Um, and then another one, he now works at a PE firm, and we intern together at our local firm. And so I think those two folks really helped me stay motivated to keep like really good grades and keep on the grind. But then also like I have some family background and I saw the mistakes they made, specifically some of my older siblings, with not being as prepared during school. And I said, that is not going to be me. I will not let that be me, ever. And so I wanted to prove to myself that it wasn't going to be. And to make sure that it wasn't going to be, there were certain steps I had to take.
Gotcha. And so like you can just the way you talk about like when someone's on a networking call, you can tell if they're genuinely interested with you. You can like I can tell, we can tell that you're
Right.
genuinely interested in IB and like you love this stuff. But that's not something that always happens. Like industry turnover rate, 18.6%. Every single person that I talk to from my school or that I know have worked at an IB job, number one, they're saying that they hate it and they're trying to get out. Or number two, they're saying it's a stepping stone. I'm going to go in there, suffer for 2 years, and then boom, exit into private equity. Do you do you think that's what this job is meant for? Do you think people are misinterpreting it? What do you think? Like, why do some people just love it? Why do some people not? Like, break that.
Um, Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think a lot of people go into it for the money. I
Okay.
mean, I don't see why. It's a good reason. I don't say that to a recruiter, but it's a good reason. Like your job is your job. You do your job to make money, to live, more or less. Um, I think I got really lucky. I don't think I would like IB as much if it wasn't at my current firm. Just the people I work with, the deals we do, the way the deal team works. I feel important even as an analyst, rather than just another cog.
Mhm.
So I think that's a huge proponent that is missed in bulge brackets. Is you are just a machine that is churning out work, and no matter where you go, no matter what the subject is, that sucks. Um, I mean, look at like medical students who do their residency. I feel like it's rare that you meet a medical student that's like, "Oh yeah, I loved my residency."
Yeah.
It's like the residency sucks, man. It's brutal, it's hard, but it is a stepping stone to do what you eventually love. And so I think that's okay. I think that's what the junior years with the current culture, well, with the culture that it's always been, is what investment banking is for.
And so,
And
what,
some, oh, go ahead.
what does a bulge give that a boutique doesn't? Is it just the name, status, credibility?
It's name, status, or prestige is the common term thrown around. It's compensation, oftentimes. So, I mean, yeah, bulge brackets usually have the best compensation. And it's, I mean, skill set too. You'll learn a lot at a bulge bracket, and you'll work on probably more deals at a bulge bracket than you would at like a firm like mine. That being said, I think what you'll get more at a boutique is you'll get more critical thinking skills because you're responsible for more. You know, I've worked directly with my director with no associate or VP in between. So that means I have to make sure I am on it. Like I cannot be making mistakes because I'm sending that directly to him. And he's depending on me to have quality checked multiple times to make sure it's good. You get more responsibility at a boutique, and you may get a little bit better of a work-life balance. It kind of depends. A lot of boutiques have even more hours than bulge brackets. Really depends on the firm across the board.
Mhm.
Um, but I think the responsibility and critical thinking is a big one that you won't get nearly as much at a bulge bracket. So depending on what you want to go into, that is more worth it than getting the name and the prestige. Depends on the person, but for me, that's how it was.
What's the pressure like? I mean, you're working directly with a director.
Um, sometimes it's tough, but I've never felt like, wow, this is too much. Like I've definitely wanted. There's a couple times I've wanted to cry at work. I'm not gonna lie. Not because anybody was mean to me,
Yeah.
but the pressure is more like I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm supposed to know what I'm doing.
Mm.
There's a lot of pressure. It's not like, oh wow, they're like screaming at me and like trying to get me to like I'm under a time crunch. I mean, sometimes I am, but it's when you're under a time crunch and you feel like you don't know what you're doing, that's when the pressure's on. And that's what can be tough. But again, it depends on the firm and the culture. At my firm, I think it's a lot more like there's a pressure and you got to get your stuff done, but like communicate with us and we'll be able to work together as an entire team to finish it up.
Okay, so they encourage like a mentorship or management, like speak up and
Yeah.
advocate that you need help, and they're there to help you.
Yeah. Not that you need less work, but that you need help. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm doing a presentation tomorrow. It's a debate in my leadership class, and the topic we chose was J.P. Morgan capping their junior banking hours at 80 hours per week. So they can't go over 80 because I think there were like two deaths in Wall Street or something like that, and
Yep.
boom, it's up like that. Um, it sounds like you're not quite at the 100-hour weeks. Sometimes you work the 80-hour weeks. My question though is when you're at those 80-hour weeks and being in the office that long, do you think it's actually effective? Or does it just like burn you out and make people less productive? And so essentially you're not even really like you're just being there to be there, work's not as good.
Yeah, I think at my firm it's definitely effective. It is 100% effective because uh we're never just there to be there. Like I said, like we're really only supposed to we only have to be in the office from like 9 to 5, 9 to 6. Now obviously if the partners are still there and stuff like that, you should still be there. But we're not there to just be there. And so while we are there, we're working. Like you'll if you jump on like a Wall Street Oasis or like some of the like Reddit financial careers or something like that, you'll see a lot of folks that are just like, yeah, I'm in investment banking. I work, like 100 hours a week, but like 40 of those hours, I'm just sitting at my desk waiting for comments. And that's just not how it works at the bank I'm at.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, there'd be nothing more frustrating than that.
Yeah,
What's the longest day you've ever worked?
longest day was about 15 hours.
15.
Yeah.
It was that day like the craziest day that's ever happened
No,
or
there was just a lot that needed to get done. Um, And I think I joined the firm at kind of a weird time where we were doing some kind of restructuring of deals we do.
yeah.
So we used to take on a lot of smaller deals all at once, and now we're kind of moving towards like we do some buy side deals, and we're on retainer for quite a few companies as like an outsourced private equity team almost. In addition to doing sell side mandates. And so there's not as much pressure to like do a ton of deals at one time. And so that's lessened the load. But at the same time, it's like we're almost there's a lot of like miscellaneous stuff that has to be done for some of the buy side deals. So it wasn't like it was a long day just because there was a lot of tasks that needed to be wrapped up. Um, and I think it probably could have been longer, uh, but fortunately we weren't under that much of a time crunch.
Okay.
But
What's
it definitely could have been longer. Yeah, now that I'm thinking about it.
what's the deal with these timelines? I was talking to someone a couple weeks ago, and he's going to work at Evercore, so very very good bank. And
Yep.
he's saying kids are blowing up his line, but these are freshmen. Like when I was when I would have been recruiting for IB, I didn't have an interest. I would have been it would have been my sophomore spring. It's like moved up now where it's like sophomore fall. Before you know it, it's gonna be freshman year, whatever. I'm trying to figure out like, do you know why these recruiting lines timelines keep moving up? And you think this is effective, or how's a freshman supposed to figure out what they're doing as a freshman, like for IB? Such a commitment.
I think it's is it effective? No, I don't think so. It's because I mean you're interviewing kids that have no idea if they actually you don't know if they actually know the material, right?
Right.
Like they can you can and that makes it so the interviews are slightly easier. Not a ton, but I feel like they're a little easier than they used to be, maybe like 5, 10 years ago, from what I've heard. Um, and so it just puts pressure on these kids to like do a lot of memorizing and like very specific concepts, like learning very specific concepts. They're not really understanding the entire like what is valuation, right? Or like how to operate an investment bank, like what a lot of these things are that they need to know. And
Mhm.
so I feel like it kind of lets a lot of kids float under the radar as long as they're just told about it soon enough. That doesn't mean they actually like investment banking or want to go into it. That's why there's such high turnover. I mean, they're just looking to like get the offer and then they burn out once they actually get to the real job in like 6 months. Um, I think the reason banks do it though is because they're just constantly competitive for the top talent.
Okay.
And so typically, I mean, and that's true. If there's a kid that's more informed earlier on, he's probably going to do better. I
Mhm.
mean, I look at it at my non-target school. It's like I was the most informed, given it's because I went out seeking for that information, but I was the most informed early on, and that's why I got into the job that I have. So it's kind of a gamble, but I see why the banks do it.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. What about so like I'm a freshman, I come in, I know I want to do this. What is my action plan? Whether I'm at a target or a non-target school, like first step, second step, third step, if you could do it all over again, what would that be? And when? When should I start?
Yeah, so it's never too early to start networking. Um, Getting to know the industry, getting to know what bankers like to hear. I know that
Mhm.
sounds bad, but it's a big one. Um, so that's super important. Getting your story down, your why IB. If you're in investment banking, you may have heard that before, or not. But like your why IB story, like this is why 2 minutes, like max, why you want to go into IB. Make it convincing. Don't make it like a salesman speech, but make it convincing and try to make it as real as you can.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's like you got to get down your technicals. You have to study, all the different valuation techniques, your accounting principles, your a lot of your different finance principles, all that stuff. So then you can, once you do finally get that opportunity to interview, you're ready.
Is that stuff like something you can just come in and memorize it, or is it more something that you can memorize parts of it, but you have to fully understand? It's like conceptual.
I think you can memorize parts of it for sure. What investment banks will do, because this is what I do when I interview kids, and what happened to me when I was being interviewed, is if you sound confident in an answer, they will continue to dig until you don't know anymore.
Okay.
And this is a good thing and a bad thing, because if you memorize, um, typically you'll get through the first kind of portion of the question, or even the second, but they'll keep digging, and this is how they weed kids out is if you try to BS your way through it, you'll basically get found out and you won't make it any further. Whereas if you're a kid that like understands more of the general concept and is able to critically think, and you say like, okay, I know this and this and this, and you answer the question correctly, and then they dig a little deeper, and you're like, actually, I'm not really sure about this, but this is kind of how I'm thinking about it. Am I on the right track? What do you think? Sort of like that. It's a little better. Obviously, it's best if you just know it flat out and you understand the concept, but um, you can memorize it to a degree, but they will keep prying.
So it's better just to come out and say, listen,
Uh,
I'm not 100% sure, but this is my thought process behind it.
to
Rather,
to a
yeah,
degree, yeah. I mean, still try to understand the whole concept. Because if I'm asking a simple accounting principle question, and a kid is like, "Oh, I'm not sure. Like, this is what I think. Am I right?" I'm gonna be like, "Dude, like, you gotta at least get a little deeper, right?
right.
You gotta know some stuff for sure, 100%."
Okay.
Um, but yeah, once you get into like the really deep stuff that they don't really expect you to know, but they want to see if you know it, that's when you can kind of you put on your thinking cap and work with them.
On the topic of time management, like I mentioned at the start, what you do is really impressive. Content is not even a video a day is not something that's easy to do. It's very difficult. And then when you put that in, I can't imagine working 8 to 6, 8 to 7, 8 to 11 p.m. some nights when you come home, and then getting up. But you're getting up at 5:30 and you're bodybuilding. Like you're running on very zero sleep, not a lot of energy. Your day's packed. Like, do you have time management stuff? How do you fit all this stuff in?
Yeah, so my rule is I shoot for 6 hours of sleep. That's like my rule. And if I don't get 6 hours of sleep, then I won't go to the gym in the morning. I think sleep is better. I prioritize my career over the gym, obviously. And so I'd much rather prefer to sleep and work better the next day than sleep and go to the gym and just be exhausted all day, even if I do drink caffeine, right?
Wow.
Um, so that means that I'm trying to get to bed at like 11, which usually works. Also, quick tip, if you want work-life balance, be good at your job. Like flat out. Like if you want a work-life balance, be really good at your job because you'll be much more efficient during the day. Um,
Okay, you're
so
saying
like
you'll finish your work sooner and then you'll be able to
yeah,
go.
exactly.
But with
Or
IB, though, I feel like the culture is competitive. And so part of the reason is like you have to come and show that you're willing to work hard. So does that have an
yeah,
effect?
I think that's true. Definitely, and that's definitely true in a lot of bigger banks. But for me, this is what works, right? And I'm not going to say that like if you work at a bulge bracket, it's really hard. Like you have even less control over your life.
Mhm.
I'm not going to say that you would be able to bodybuild. I don't know. I haven't been there. I'm trying to speak from like experience, right? I don't want to project onto anyone. I don't want to be the the 24-year-old influencer who makes 500K a year off of their Instagram saying like we all have the same 24 hours. Of course you can go to the gym. I'm not that guy. I'm like, hey, this is what I do, and it works mostly. Maybe you can do it too if you have a similar lifestyle.
Okay.
And honestly, it just comes down to I put rules in place. Like I said, the 6 hours of sleep rule, um, or like minimum 3 days a week exercise. So like let's say I'm really only getting like 5 6 hours of sleep, like 5 hours of sleep every night because of work. I will then um, do 2 days on the weekend. Two of my exercise days will be on the weekend because I'll have more time, and then
Mhm.
I'll try to fit another day in on like Wednesday. And usually it works out all right.
Okay.
Um, it just comes down to like making some of those non-negotiable rules around your schedule that work. And I know that's really tough and that's kind of ambiguous, but it's what works for me.
Okay. Do you okay, so I want to break down the sleep thing you said is so interesting. I've never heard anybody say that before. But the whole thing about like working, let's just say you're on a computer all the time. Do you have certain methods that help you focus? Or is it just kind of like a caffeine thing?
Caffeine helps for sure. Um, Changing tasks can help. So like if I'm grinding away on like a model or something, and before I do like a quality control to make sure it's ship shape to send out, I'll switch tasks if it's not time sensitive. I'll switch tasks and then come back to it so I can get almost like a fresh set of eyes on it. Um, but not staring or not doing the same thing like endlessly um, helps. Sometimes that's not possible. But other than that, to focus, I haven't had too much problems focusing yet, to be honest. Like it's the same thing in school. Studying was never like that much of a problem. I never struggled with like focusing that much. So it's hard for me to relate on that front. Sorry if that's not a complete answer.
No, 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 totally makes sense. I'll just give you like a personal thing that I've been dealing with a lot. So, graduating in May, I'm going to a city next year, and I'm thinking about work, and I'm trying to think about content, and then I'm thinking about the podcast, and then I'm thinking about my social life, and then I'm thinking about just weightlifting in general, and I'm like, something's got to give. And it's just been in my head a lot lately. Like, I'm not going to give up the content. I'm not going to give up the podcast. Can't give up work. So I'm trying to figure out, like, is the gym just going to completely fall off, or is it going to be sleep? And I'm running on no sleep. But I don't know. I've been thinking
I
about it a
see
lot.
what you're saying. Yeah. And with the content on my front, that's where I sacrifice, which I know we're not the same in, which is absolutely fine. But like I don't think I posted at all this week.
Oh,
Um, yeah, like and fortunately, I mean, you'll see that my numbers aren't like super high. My engagement's usually pretty good. Um, but I think I just have a loyal follower base. I engage with my followers as much as I can. I do a lot of like ask me anythings, or I'll always respond to DMs because I can do that while I'm working. Whereas making content is much harder for me, but I still want to be a resource to these people, to a lot of my followers. And so I may not have the time to make a reel or a lot of that stuff, but I will have time to respond to some DMs, so I put out content when I can.
yeah. And that was one thing I was going to say. Like, just, I mean, I followed your account, but actually taking a really deep dive into it yesterday, I could tell that your followers, like, they really support you. And I could, like, you could just tell, like, there's some sort of connection there. And I think it's exactly what you said. Like, all the stuff engaging on the stories, always reaching out. I got a lot of respect for that. And I'm sure that, like, those people probably really, really look up to you. So that's awesome to see. Alrighty. So I think we're kind of at the end of this conversation. I don't know if there's anything else that you want to bring up that we haven't discussed yet.
I think we've mostly covered it. I guess the biggest thing is just like I'm not out here trying to be like, oh, look at me, I'm in investment banking. I'm not at like some bulge bracket. I don't chase. I'm from a small town. I don't chase a lot of the luxury items that a lot of investment bankers do.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't even think that it's like the best career path. I'm not like, oh, I'm in investment banking. There's a lot of prestige here. I think that's important for um, a lot of people to understand about the industry is like, yes, you can have that 100%. But if you don't want that, that's also okay. If you want to be investment banking, but not at a bulge bracket, that's okay. If you want to go to the bulge bracket and chase the prestige, that's also okay. Um, that's kind of the message I want to communicate with my page is to a lot of my followers, like, hey, a lot of them are from foreign countries outside of the United States. They're looking to get anything in investment banking they can. And I make it clear that it's okay to be a financial analyst, or it's okay to break in later. It's okay to take the long road, or to be at a boutique like Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, and Bank of America and JP Morgan are not the end all be all. If you think they are the end all be all, that is okay. They can be your end all be all, but it doesn't have to be like that for everyone.
Well said. Awesome. Fit Finance, bro. Thank you so much for coming on Gross Potential. This was fantastic. You want to let people know just where they can find you as a final wrap up?
Yeah, just on Instagram. I actually don't have TikTok. Again, like I said, just I'm not the greatest at putting out content, but it is genuine. It is I respond to my DMs. I love my followers. I love what I do. If you need any advice, I'll give it where I can. Just on Instagram at Fit Finance Bro.
If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Somewhere on the screen should direct you to somewhere else in our channel. But as always, believe foolishly.